All right. I'm Eva Biondelillo from Homeowners Resource Group. And here I have with me Eric Habib. He's an attorney that specializes in evictions, landlord tenant court, and real estate. Is that correct?
Yes.
Are there any other areas of law that you currently practice?
Um, uh, a little bit of trusts and LLCs and whatnot.
Okay. So you do a little bit of estate planning as well, business planning, helping people with setting up corporations, transferring them, closing them.
Yes,
Yep.
that and flipping real estate, like
Mm-hmm.
assignment contracts,
Mm-hmm.
regular buying and selling of homes,
Mm-hmm.
and evictions.
Cool. So that's how I met you. Another investor had introduced us a few years ago, and then we rekindled through the East Coast Real Estate Investors Association group. Since I primarily handle properties that are in distress with people without paying tenants, squatters, and property issues, I normally turn down those deals because I didn't want to deal with getting people out. But especially in New York, where the laws are very strict on what's a tenant, what's a squatter, and it's very hard to get them out. Police officers don't want to just go and remove people from properties. They're always telling us, you have to go to the sheriff's office, you have to get them removed, you have to go to landlord tenant court. So that's where I brought you in. I think we have 7 or 8 evictions going on right now. We've already completed 2 or 3 of them, and it's been a very good experience in my eyes. You know exactly what to do. You get it done quickly. We're in and out, and it's been very effective in helping me with getting my deals done, helping these homeowners get the properties empty so that they can sell them and get possession back of them again. So thank you for what you've done so far.
You're welcome.
And I would like to help others that are in these situations as well with shedding some light and knowledge. So, how did you start on doing evictions?
The first time I got involved with evictions was around 25 years ago when I had purchased a property that had 8 apartments in it, and they were all occupied, but the rents were way too low. So I knew when I had purchased it that if I could put in higher paying tenants, and then I'd massively increase the value of the property. So we kept one tenant who's actually still there 25 years later.
Wow.
And the other ones we evicted and put in better tenants, higher paying tenants. So
Is
that's
that
the
in
first.
Long Island
Yeah,
or
that was in Suffolk County, and that was in 2000.
what town?
That one was in Bayshore.
Okay. And you still have the property.
Yeah.
That's cool. And better tenants.
Yes.
Legal 8 family.
Yes.
So it's considered a commercial property then.
Mhm.
Is there any difference between doing a commercial eviction versus a residential, which is a 1 to 4 family?
No.
Nothing. Just it's landlord tenant by
Not
the
in Long
lease.
Island. Yeah, there's no
Not in
difference.
Long Island. We could talk about New York City at another time. That's a whole different ballgame. But
Yeah.
because I've experienced.
Actually, this was two four families that were right next to each other.
Oh,
So I
okay.
considered it an eight.
Oh, and you bought them together,
Right.
and then you
Right.
took it on and took on the project.
Right.
But that was also a value add opportunity because you saw a property that needed help with getting these people rearranged, so to speak,
Right.
and back up to par. So you essentially helped the seller out by buying them out, and then you fixed it back up and put it into where it is today.
Right. Right. The property also needed a lot of renovations, so we had to evict the tenants for that, and they hadn't been paying rent in a long time to the prior owner. So
Okay.
right.
Were all of them cash tenants? Were some of them on programs?
One of them was on a program. She's still there, and the other ones were cash, I think.
What is a Section 8 program?
Yes.
What would you say like the benefits are of doing Section 8 versus a cash tenant?
Well, with the Section 8, you get the government's portion of the rent every
Mhm.
month on the first. It gets actually electronically transferred to your account, which is nice.
Yep.
So if the tenant doesn't pay their portion, usually it's a small portion. It doesn't really hurt that much.
Yep. I have a couple tenants that are on that as well. They all seem to pay their portion on time. What happens if they don't pay their portion?
Um, Usually when that happens, you maybe let it go a month or two, depending on if the portion is only $200 a month, it might not make sense to evict.
Right.
Um,
Unless it builds
Leave
up
the
over 3, 4, 5 months,
Yeah,
it becomes
exactly.
$1,000.
But
And
you could do your 5-day late letter and your 14-day rent demand, but some I tend to let it go a couple of months.
so a 5-day late letter, is that something an attorney or the landlord can prepare?
Um, The landlord could prepare it, but most landlords wouldn't know how to do it properly.
Right. So it's better to just have an attorney draft it and serve it like you helped me do on my one that I wanted out recently.
Right.
And it worked because she left a few weeks later. So,
Okay.
um, and we avoided having to do an eviction altogether. So she found another place. She didn't want to get kicked off of her program, so she just left on her own, which was good. Because once you serve people that are on a program with an eviction, what happens to their benefits?
So if they're evicted for non-payment of rent, supposedly they could lose their benefits.
Right.
I've never actually seen that happen, but
Because they don't want to lose it.
I'm not. Well, I mean, I don't know what happens to them after,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
yeah,
We try to avoid it before that it gets to that point.
Mhm.
And then what was the other thing? A 14-day letter?
Right. If you're suing for non-payment of rent, or then you have to give them a 14-day rent demand.
Mhm.
If after 14 days from when they're served, they haven't paid the rent, then you can commence a lawsuit in housing court.
Right. And then that's when a 90-day notice is served?
No, a 90-day notice is for a different kind of case.
Okay.
If it's just non-payment of rent, then right after the 14 days are up, that's when you can go to court. And
Okay.
there is no 30, 60, or 90-day notices in
Okay.
that type of case.
So what are the two differences between a non-paying tenant and a squatter?
Okay, a non-paying tenant and a squatter. Uh,
It's a big one.
they're very different because one is a tenant and one is not a tenant. A
Right.
squatter is a trespasser. That's somebody who entered possession of the property without the permission of whoever the owner is, and without the permission of anybody else who had the right to have possession of the property.
Right.
So in that case, you might try going to the police, um, but I'm told that unless you have really good proof that, like a video of them breaking in or something like that, and it's occurred in fairly recently, then the police might not be
Yep.
willing to do that. Is that your experience?
That was the few cases that, most of the cases you and I have together are these were vacant properties that were abandoned. The owner passed away. The family thought the house went back to the bank because there was a reverse mortgage on it or whatever. And the family just kind of was like, all right, well, the bank owns the property now. They actually lived down the block still, one of them, and they would see people going in and out of the house. And they're like, oh, I guess the bank took the house over. Meanwhile, it was just squatters that broke in and are living in there. Half the time, too, it's somebody that works for the bank or works for the property preservation company that puts them in there.
Oh, really?
They'll put a fake lease together. They'll get a burner phone. They're like, you know what? I know this house is vacant. Let's just get a quick couple grand, move on. They'll try to collect rent for a little while, make a fake lease, and then now voila, they're a tenant. It was funny because the one that we just did in Bayshore, again, with the squatters, she was trying to say, they had to be out by August 31st. And she's like, well, I have a lease till October 31st. I'm like, the owner is dead. You have no lease. Just go before the sheriff comes next week. Like, it's time. But they'll like legit just take over the property and try to just take possession of it and hold it hostage. I call it,
Uh-huh.
holding a house hostage. Um, we did have another situation in the town of North Hempstead in New Hyde Park where the police did get the squatters out. But that's only because we were there a couple weeks before and we had possession of it. And then we had proof that we were just there.
Okay.
But when it's gone on, more than 30 days, that's when they want you to go to landlord tenant court, get the sheriff involved in the whole thing. Even if it is a squatter, they consider them tenants. Um, so now why do you think in New York there's more issues with evictions, with squatters, tenants not paying, and being able to stay in the house for so long?
Um, that's been in the news a lot because in 2019, the laws changed. It made it much harder for a landlord to evict a tenant. The tenants were given a lot more rights. I think it's called the Tenant Protection Act of 2019.
Right.
So that's part of the reason why it's in the news a lot. And then also a year or two later with COVID, we had the moratoriums for
Yeah.
a couple of years. And it was taking landlords forever to evict a tenant. In fact, the courts had the moratorium in
Yep.
place against evictions. So those two factors taken together, and then also we have an affordable housing crisis in Long Island, supposedly.
Mhm.
So there's not a lot of affordable housing available. So people don't have anywhere to live that they can afford. So
Yeah.
they try to stay in apartments and houses for as long as they possibly can.
Right.
They don't just leave. And if I guess if they have nowhere to go, they just squat or break
Yep.
in. So
Yep.
and then um, after COVID, it's been in everyone's minds so much that I guess that's why I noticed New York and all across the country they're enacting these laws that making it supposedly easier to evict squatters.
Right. Yeah. So during COVID, that was my experience. I owned a four-family in Brooklyn. Three of the tenants weren't paying. I started the eviction on one of them in 2019. COVID came, couldn't get them out for about 3 years. It was basically going nowhere in landlord tenant court. I had to file a second judgment against the tenants for non-payment of rent, so at least they would like owe me money back because I was getting nowhere with landlord tenant court. So then when I started going after them in like a collections aspect, I was able to like get them out a little bit quicker. But New York City is like a lot harder. Do you handle evictions out there as well?
Yes, that's a
Yeah.
whole different world. Yes, it
Mhm.
can be take a lot longer.
Yep. Yeah. Um so if a landlord or a homeowner doesn't take legal action right away, say, the tenant hasn't paid in a couple weeks and they're being lenient and then a month goes by, 2 months goes by, what's the detriment to the homeowner or the landlord if they wait to file, a notice for rent or eviction or something?
Right. This comes up a lot. People call me and they want to inquire about evicting a bad tenant, someone that's not paying the rent or who they just want out. But I think landlords don't want to spend money, so they try to put it off, and the tent maybe we're like the 17th or 18th of the month, let's say, and they want to see if the tenant's going to pay the rent on the first. Then maybe
Right.
they'll start the eviction on the second of next month.
Mhm.
Um, and then
And they wait a
and then if
couple
the
months.
first comes and the tenant will tell them, "Well, I just need another week."
Yeah.
And then after a while, it can be another month or 2 or even
Yep.
more gone by, and you haven't
Right.
started the process yet.
Right.
So that's why I think it's always better to start the process as soon as possible, at least with just some type of a notice.
Yeah. And then if they don't start it right away, is there any sort of like their case isn't as strongly held up in court if they wait any longer, or is it just the same?
Um, if the tenant has lived there a really long time, then I guess the case will be the same.
Mhm.
But certainly if it's a squatter, I think you want to start it right away.
Right.
Um, but just there's the longer you wait, the longer the chances that an occupant can further damage the property
Yes.
or um, just owe you more money. And a
Bring
lot of
more
times,
people in.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's possible. A lot of times, then they'll just owe you more money, which you'll
Mhm.
never recoup,
Right.
probably.
Right. It's like just get it out of the way from day one, nip it in the bud, as they say, and get it on with. Um, so is there a way for a family member to evict another family member? I have some of these situations. So estate house, mother passes away, daughter becomes the administrator. Her brother's living in the house for free. He hasn't lived anywhere else in his life. He can't afford to move out. He doesn't think about paying rent ever anywhere else. These situations happen a lot where, like, the one of the kids hasn't ever learned how to live on their own. So they're living in this house for free. Meanwhile, it's falling into foreclosure and disrepair. And the rest of the kids or siblings are like, can we sell this house, get some money out of it? Can we move on with our lives instead of you just living here for free? And they end up stop talking to each other or whatever, and they say, "I want to evict them." Is there a way for them to get a family member out like that?
So you're talking about after someone has passed away?
We'll talk about
Heirs?
estates first,
Oh,
yeah. Sibling to sibling, like,
okay.
can a sibling evict another sibling or something like that on an estate house?
And who's the owner of this house?
Their parents who passed away,
Mhm. Um,
and one of the siblings is the administrator.
it's possible. It depends if a sibling moved in after the death without any permission, they could actually be considered a squatter
Right,
if they moved in without permission of, let's say, the executor.
right.
Um,
What if they were living there
or
before?
if they were living there before, yes, a sibling can be evicted by a sibling. Um, the sibling, in order to evict, though, you would have to be first be made the. You'd have to have letters
Right.
testamentary.
Mhm.
Okay, you'd have to have standing. Um,
if they have
the
that.
if there's the only time when, well, you can always evict somebody. The question is, what court can you do it in?
Right.
In landlord tenant court, as long as there's no duty, support obligation of some sort of the person who's being evicted, that can usually be done in landlord tenant court. If the person who's living in there was being taken care of by somebody else, and
Like
there's
they're
some sort, like, well,
incompetent.
especially if it's somebody who's under 18,
Mhm,
or if they're incompetent or
mhm.
something like that, then you would probably have to do that in family court or
Right,
even in Supreme Court.
right, to say that they need, like, some sort of guardianship, or what if it's just, an adult that doesn't feel like paying rent or moving out, and they just are holding the house hostage because they feel like it?
At what stage though is that?
Post, I would say, owners died, other child has already moved out, became administrator, and the other siblings are just there kinda just living in the house for free,
Uh,
without paying the mortgage or anything like that.
if there's no duty of support to
Mhm,
that person
mhm.
and they're not disabled or anything like
Correct.
that, then yes, I would say that the executor, could evict. Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Because I was told once before by somebody else that you'd have to do, like, an ejectment proceeding through Supreme Court. I don't know. I guess it just depends on, like, case by case, right?
You have to do that in Supreme Court if there's a duty of support.
Okay.
Right, or if it's a spouse, or if a spouse is trying to evict someone that they're separated from, or
Right.
a wife or something like that, or
Because I have another situation where the owner passed away. One of the daughters is the administrator. She's moved on with her life. Her sister is living in the property with the administrator's husband. So they, like, the administrator and her husband separated. He moved in with her sister at the parents' house. It's in foreclosure. There's actually no water, no electric. They're just kinda, like, squatting in there at this point, holding the house hostage, as I call it, and won't leave.
so the husband moved in
Yeah,
with
so
the
basically the
sister.
son-in-law of the owner moved in with one of the daughters.
Yeah, you see, that's another trick. That's a tricky one because there's also a marriage relationship there. So you're
Right.
evicting.
A spouse
Yeah, so
that's living in your parents' house.
that's a confusing one.
We'll talk about that one later. Um, so, all right, legal rights and options for homeowners. So, what are the legal rights of a homeowner when they're dealing with a non-paying tenant? So, a non-paying tenant is somebody that's either been considered living in the property or has a lease, correct? Like, not a squatter,
Right.
a non-paying tenant.
So a non-paying tenant. So you have to. It used to be before 2019. You just make a phone call to the tenants, believe it or not, and tell them, um, the rent for September of $3,500 was not paid. I need you to pay it within 3 days.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I'm going to file papers in court to have you evicted. That's how simple it was,
Right.
just over the phone.
Rent demand.
Right, oral.
Mhm.
So in 2019, that changed. Now you have to give a 5-day letter, a letter giving, and it can't be done until after the 5th day of the month
Right.
because you have to give them like a 5-day grace period.
Mhm.
Send them a letter that you're late on this rent. We need it paid as soon as possible, and that has to be done by certified mail. Then, in order to go to court, though, you have to give a 14-day rent demand,
Right.
which says you have 14 days to pay this unpaid rent.
Mhm.
After after you're served, 14 days after you're served, we'll file papers in court
Mhm.
to take you to court.
Right. And then that's when the
And then
appearances come into play.
right.
Now, these courts are district courts, right? On Long Island, it's like 5th district, whatever. So you're not doing it in Supreme Court in Riverhead or Mineola. You're doing it like per town, so to speak.
Yes.
So like Smithtown's in town of Smithtown, Brookhaven, town of Brookhaven. The one we did in Bayshore, I think, was in Ronkonkoma and Vets Highway.
Right. Town
Right.
of Islip,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, so that's where the town of Islip one is. And then the Nassau ones are like spread apart, like wherever they are. Right.
Everything in Nassau goes to the Hempstead Court, except for
Right.
if it's in Glen Cove or there might be one or two others.
If it's in a village, then it's in the
Right.
village court, like Glen Cove. What about
Long
Long
Beach, yeah.
Beach? City of Long Beach, Rockville Center, I'm assuming. Hempstead Village, even though it's in Hempstead,
No, just that goes as the
that
Hempstead.
goes to the same
Yeah.
thing.
And,
Um,
and then, if interestingly about that kind of case, if the tenant pays the rent at any point before the sheriff comes, then you have to keep the tenant. That's something to keep in mind.
So if they are behind, say, 6 months and they come up with all 6 months and give you the money, you can no longer evict them,
Right.
even if you have the warrant.
Right.
And you've given the warrant to the sheriff's ready to go tomorrow. All of a sudden you get the rent check. Now you got to keep them.
Yes.
You can't not take it.
Well, if they would go to court and all that. I mean, they could be evicted, but if they go to court and they file a motion of like an order to
Mhm.
so cause, then you would end up probably having to keep the tenant.
Wow. Even if you didn't want them there anymore.
Right. That's why it's better to do a holdover case and give the 30, 60, or 90-day notice if you really want someone out. But a lot of times you can't do that. Sometimes people call me up and say, I really want this person out, but it turns out there's a 2-year lease and there's a year and a half left on the lease.
So what could they do?
So a lot of times we do a non-payment case.
So what type of landlord tenant cases are there? There's a holdover, a non-payment. What else?
Squatter,
Right?
um, licensee, somebody's a licensee, like a family member would usually be a licensee,
Okay.
or just a friend,
Mm-hmm.
somebody that you're evicting that maybe wasn't paying rent,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't a squatter.
Right.
You've got post foreclosure cases. If you buy a house at auction,
Right.
that's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. Those are a little quicker, a little easier.
Yeah, if it's a prior owner who's living there.
Right.
Right.
What
If
if it
it's
was a prior tenant?
right, if they're a bona fide tenant, then that's a 90-day notice.
And that's then, but it's still a post foreclosure case. Okay.
Yes, but it's 90-day notice.
Mm-hmm. Are there any sort of special cases for houses that are in foreclosure that haven't been foreclosed on yet, or it's just all treated like a regular deal?
That's treated like a regular deal.
Okay. Yeah. Figured that. So is the process any different if somebody's a squatter rather than a tenant with a lease? We just kind of touched on that, the different types of cases. If you could just explain like the difference between them.
Right. A squatter case is if they're a squatter, that's a 10-day notice.
Mm-hmm.
After 10 days after the occupant is served with the notice, then you can file the papers in court.
Okay.
Tenant, if if it's a tenant, that's somebody who occupied the property with permission, as opposed to someone who
Or
occupied it at
fake permission with a fake lease.
Right, but that's still a squatter, though. I guess if
The
it's the
police consider it a tenant, you know?
right.
That happens all the time.
Well, the police aren't going to evaluate whether the lease is real or not. That's the
Right.
thing.
That only gets done in
Well,
court.
right.
You have to bring it as a holdover then, right? As a holdover case, or you could still
No,
bring it as a squatter case,
no, you do it
but
as a squatter, 10
right.
day, yeah.
As long as the owner can say, I've never met this person, I've never given them access, I've never signed this lease, my mother never did, she's dead, whatever. Okay. So what's the difference between a non-paying and a holdover case?
So the holdover case, we went over the non-pay. The
Mhm.
holdover case, if there's a month-to-month tenant, let's say, if the tenant has lived in the house for less than 1 year, you give them a 30-day notice.
Okay.
If they've lived there between 1 year and 2 years, you give them 60 days notice. If they've lived there more than 2 years, it's a 90-day notice. And again, that's part of the Tenant Protection Act of 2019.
Right.
Prior to 2019, it was always just a 30-day notice.
Right.
So
Now, what if their lease, it like you said before, is 2 years, but they've been there a year and a half, and the owner just wants them out sooner because they want to either sell the house, they want to raise the rent, the tenant can't afford it, or they just want possession back. Is there any way to start an eviction earlier than when the lease ends?
you can give notice of non-renewal.
Okay.
Let's say there's only a few months left. Maybe give them a notice that and you synchronize it with the date of the
Yep.
expiration of the lease.
Mhm.
But if you want to start the case right away sooner, then the only way would be non-payment of rent with a 14-day rent demand, or maybe if there's some type of a nuisance or lease violation going on,
Right.
then you can give them. Usually, it's a 10-day notice to cure.
Right.
If they don't cure, but that's a little bit of a harder type of case to prove.
Right. Because then it's up to the judge to decide if this is valid or not and if it's going to proceed.
Right.
Do you find that in situations like that, that the judges are more on the landlord side or on the tenant's side in New York?
I think it I think it varies from in the city. It's very hard to do a case like that, and in s- it, I mean, if there's if the tenant is selling drugs, let's say, and you have proof of it, then they'll be on the landlord's side.
Right.
As long as you have good proof of the lease violation or the nuisance,
Mhm.
then you can be successful with that.
Mhm. Okay. And then, what's the benefit of having an attorney help them with the eviction versus doing it themselves?
Avoiding making mistakes. It's 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 kind of a simple process, but it's actually very complicated.
Yeah.
Um, I find a lot of times tenants come to me and I'll represent tenants and I find things wrong with what their attorneys did in the paperwork.
Right.
So even attorneys make mistakes in the paperwork.
On the landlord side.
Right.
Right.
So you want to make sure that you don't make any mistakes as a landlord.
Right.
Um, the landlord doesn't know what they don't know, I think.
Yeah.
So service has to be perfect.
Yep.
The paperwork has to be perfect.
Yep.
Even a few words can
Yep.
invalidate a notice.
I had hired another eviction attorney, and somebody messed up the zip code on it, and it completely dismissed the case. We had to start all over. So yeah, I've been there. Um,
I had a friend of mine just had a case dismissed because he didn't know that in the city you have to put the notice of petition has to be given in Spanish now as well as English. There's all kinds of little things
hmm,
that's just one of a million examples that
right.
a landlord just wouldn't know.
Right. Yeah. You have to keep up with everything. And
Mhm.
how do you get notified when changes like this happen?
Sometimes there's I mean, I belong to a few organizations where we have lunch once a month with the judges, which
Hmm.
you learn some stuff that way just from having friends that are attorneys, which
Right.
I have.
Yeah.
Um, um,
Do they put
just
out
like
like a
going to
bulletin?
court. No,
Yeah.
rarely. There was a million bulletins during COVID because the law was
Right.
changing every 2 weeks.
Right.
But no, there aren't too many bulletins lately.
Yeah.
It's
It's
just
just
kind of
word of
like
mouth kind
it's
of
just
thing and
being in
being
court and
involved.
doing it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Being out there. So now just like a brief overview, walk us through a typical eviction process in New York from start to finish.
Okay.
Like a vanilla type of deal, tenant stops paying and landlord wants them out. What's the first step they should do and how long would it typically take?
Tenant stops paying the rent if there's a lease, let's say,
Mhm.
then you would serve a 5-day notice of unpaid rent,
Mhm.
certified mail. You would serve a 14-day rent demand with a process server.
Mhm.
After 14 days are up from the date of service, you would then file papers in court, a petition and a notice of petition.
Mhm.
That would also, once that's filed in court, you would then, within a certain time frame before the court date, you would have that served by a process server on the tenants. Um, and then you have to take your affidavits of service and actually file those with the court within a short amount of time after service is complete.
Mhm.
And then you go to court. Um, Usually there's the first court date is gets adjourned for at least 2 weeks.
Why? Just cuz they feel like it?
Yeah,
Okay.
because you're that was another 2019 change in the law. A tenant is allowed to have at least a 2-week adjournment by law.
Right.
So you try to settle it the first time.
Mhm.
Oh, if the tenant doesn't show up, you can get a default judgment the first time.
Right. And that makes it go faster.
Right, because you get your judgment and your money judgment and warrant of eviction.
Right.
Okay, and then, but that's rare. So then you try to settle the case maybe on the second time, make a payment plan with
Mhm.
the tenant, and if they default on the payment plan, then you can then submit an affidavit of noncompliance with the settlement agreement with the court, and you would get your warrant and judgment at that point. Um, if the case is not settled, then you need to have a hearing with the judge.
Right.
Um, at the hearing, you have to both the landlord and the tenant show up with their attorneys, and you have to have a rent ledger and be able to prove that the rent was owed and not paid for certain time periods.
Mhm.
And then the tenant can also raise defenses,
Yep.
like the apartment wasn't in habitable condition,
Right.
or they want to mitigate the amount of rent that's owed.
Mhm.
Um, So, and then the judge makes a decision, and depending on where you are, the decisions like can be anywhere from 30 days to vacate and a
Right.
money judgment, something
Right.
like that.
So from the time of the first 5-day notice for rent to be paid till getting a warrant of eviction, there could be 5 or 6 appearances in court over a year-long period or something like that, you would say, give or take?
In the city, definitely.
Mhm.
Um, in Suffolk County, no, it wouldn't take that long.
Mhm.
In Suffolk County, the second court appearance, first the court appearance, second court appearance, and then possibly the third or even the fourth would be a trial,
Right.
a hearing.
Right.
Right.
So then once the landlord gets the warrant of eviction, what do they have to do next?
At that point, you get your warrant of eviction. You have to find out how many copies of the warrant of eviction you have to give to the sheriff because it depends on how many people are living in the property. So you have to send them the original warrant and a certain number of copies of the warrant. You have to find out how much money that the sheriff needs and send them that with a cover letter telling them what property stays in the house and what should be removed.
Mhm.
And then the sheriff will eventually go out and put a 14-day notice on the door telling the tenants that they have to be out in 14 days or they're going to be evicted by the sheriff.
Mhm.
And then the sheriff will send in Suffolk, they'll send you then the landlord a notice telling him how much more money is needed
Right.
because usually it's like $400 initially and then it could be thousands more to
Based
get
on
the
how much
sheriff.
stuff they had to
Yeah.
take out, how long it took, like so I think in Suffolk County, they handle rekeying the house, getting it cleaned out, all that stuff, and they just put the stuff on the lawn, right?
Yes.
And then in Nassau County, because I just did this, and then in Nassau County, you have to get the locksmith, you have to get the movers, you have to store the stuff,
Right.
you gotta get everything out. We just did one in, Inwood, and there was, like, 3 truckloads of garbage, basically, but we had to get every single piece of thing out. We couldn't leave anything behind, and then we had to be there for the lockout and everything like that. Suffolk, they just kinda do it. They don't tell you when they're gonna go, and they do it, and they send you a bill. And Nassau, like, you have to be the one there with them to do everything, right? Is that
Right.
correct?
In Nassau, it's different because you have to hire a mover that's
Yep.
on the approved list.
Right.
So you select your mover and then you fill out a few forms with the mover. You bring it to the sheriff. The fee is much less initially
Right.
with the sheriff. They only want like usually a couple of $100s.
Mhm.
And they're also pretty quick, I've noticed.
Yeah.
Nassau.
Yeah.
They get to do the eviction pretty quick or put the 14-day notice pretty quickly.
It's a lot less work for them.
Yeah, right. And then you have to store the moving company has to store the tenant's belongings for, I think, at least 30 days.
60 days, yeah.
Okay, and then, so you deal with the moving company and you pay the moving company for that.
Mhm. Yep. Yep, just went through all that. And then, if there's other people in the house and we don't know who they are, we don't know their names, we've done as much due diligence as we could, but we don't know, and we add all, like, Jane Does, John Does, and then all of those cost extra to file, names and extra warrants and things like that. That's the reason for all the extra copies, correct? Because of all the extra people that possibly may be
Yes.
involved? Okay. Um,
The purpose of the does, John Does and Jane Does are very important because a lot of times there's people living in the property that you don't know
mhm,
their names.
right.
So,
If you miss
this-
one, what happens?
so then a lot of times the sheriff of Suffolk, they'll notify me after they've gone to the house and they'll say, well, someone named Bill Smith is living in the property, but his name isn't on the warrant.
Right.
So they'll want you to then
Add
you
'em.
have to go to the back to court, file a motion to amend the warrant
Mm,
and get so you'd get like let's say you have a few John Does on the warrant, you get John Doe number one amended to Bill Smith, and
right.
then you get a new warrant with Bill Smith's name on it. I've had it where we needed to do that multiple times.
Even though you
It's
put John Doe's on there, you still had to go back and add the actual person's name because they figured out the name?
yeah, because
Oh,
what happened was somebody would when the sheriff goes puts the 14-day notice on the door and then 13 days later somebody files bankruptcy.
mhm,
Okay, so then and that name
right,
is someone whose name wasn't even on the warrant.
right.
So then you have to amend the warrant to include their name
Mhm.
and deal with the bankruptcy. And then once you get through that whole process, the sheriff ultimately months later goes and does it again, and someone with a totally different name files bankruptcy, and then you have to amend the warrant again to add substitute their name. I've seen that happen a lot,
Yeah.
and
So
you can
just
run out of does, so that's why you want to have some does.
right. Yep. Yeah, I know. We always, in our cases, since we always deal with the squatters, we always add at least 3 or 4 of each on there just because we never know who's actually in the house and you don't want to take any chances. So filing bankruptcy then, if a tenant files bankruptcy, it will postpone everything
Yes.
for how long usually?
I think it depends
Not
on.
that I want to give them this information, but
Right, yeah, it depends on the judge. There's this one judge that makes it more difficult than others in bankruptcy court.
mm,
Usually after the second bankruptcy filing, you're able to file a motion for in bankruptcy court that basically says if anybody files bankruptcy, it will not prevent an eviction from occurring.
right,
Um, but that's only after there's been a couple of them.
right,
Judge can see there's a pattern here that of why this is every time it's usually done 13 days after the sheriff puts their 14-day notice. It's
right.
obvious why they're doing the bankruptcies.
Stalling
But there's this
tactics.
one judge that he doesn't like giving you that kind of order.
Right.
He wants to see the this happen like 5 or 6 times in a row. I don't know why.
Yeah, because I know with foreclosures, people can file up to 2 times in 1 year to stop a sale. So, like, the wife will do 2 times in a year to stop 2 auctions. The husband will do the next 2, then they drag it out, and then they have, like, somebody else who says they live at the property does it, and they keep dragging it out. And then the bank catches wind of it, and they'll file what's called in rem on it to basically say, "Alright, no more bankruptcies on this property. We're taking it, this is enough." So, I guess it's kinda like the same thing, right?
Yeah, except technically I think in rem applies the statute I think applies to in the bank scenario
Yeah.
when it's an auction scenario, but
Mm,
when it's a landlord evicting a tenant, that this judge says there's no statutory authority for that.
right.
So that's why he gives a hard time about giving the in rem order.
Mm.
But the other judges,
So if he's more
they
tenant friendly, it
yeah,
depends if they're more tenant friendly, Democrat, Republican. I know that's the same in foreclosure court too, is like if they're more like homeowner friendly or bank friendly, what way they kind of like make their decisions. Um, so are there any mistakes that owners or landlords make that hurt their cases that you see?
um,
Like maybe taking money from from a tenant
oh, okay.
while they're in the middle of an eviction?
You mean like even if an attorney is handling the
Yeah.
case for them?
Yeah, like the landlord just does something
Yeah,
that like
that's one.
completely kills their case.
Yeah, that's one. Like if you give a 30-day notice to evict somebody,
Mhm.
and then let's say the 30 days were up on August 31st. This just happened actually like 6 months ago. Then it's kind of like a big company and as opposed to a small landlord.
Mhm.
So
Like one of
the
those big
person,
complexes or
yeah, the
something.
person came in, the tenant came in and then prepaid, I think 2 months of rent.
Mm.
So now, and that was deposited. So now that invalidated the 30
They had to take
notice.
it,
Right.
right.
Yeah. And if it's a 90-day notice, then that can really set you back.
Right, that's even worse. So are there any provisions to be added to a lease to make any evictions easier?
I don't really think there's any one or two or three
Right.
provisions that are magic that will make it much easier, but just having a good lease in the first place. Some of the things that I see landlords do wrong, they don't they don't put simple things like they don't put the correct name of the landlord on the lease. Like let's say the lease is Eva. I mean the
Mhm.
deed says Eva owns the property, but then you put the name of some LLC on the lease.
Right,
And that's why I try to get the deed up front so
right.
to make sure that the
It's matching.
yeah, I know what I'm doing here.
Mhm.
So always make sure that the name on the deed matches up with the name on the eviction paperwork and the lease. And if
Mhm.
not, there should be a good reason why.
Right.
Um, Also, some of the things that I would do differently than what I see some people do. A lease can commence pretty much any day during the month,
Right.
but I feel like leases should terminate at the last day of a month.
Instead of
Does that-
starting in the middle.
Right, like a lot of times they'll have the lease. A landlord will come to me and the lease says that the term ends on October 1st. I feel like it should be September 30th.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, you told me that on mine too. Because sometimes, like, if I have a vacancy and there's like, we're in the middle of the month and the person's ready to move in on the 15th, I'll start the lease on the 15th, but maybe I should just wait, give them a 2-week grace period and say, you could be here for 2 weeks for free or something. Because that'll make my life easier when it comes time, hopefully not to evict them. But, and then what about like tenant screening? What should owners be looking for when getting tenant applications for an apartment or for a house?
um, I guess tenant screening is very important. I don't get involved in that part of it that much.
Mm-hmm.
I deal with mostly
The back
Section
end.
8 tenants,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess you want to try and call a prior landlord
Right.
and see if you can talk to them and ask them if they would how their experience was with that tenant.
Right.
Um,
Background
and then
checks, credit checks.
maybe deal with a professional tenant screening company that's familiar with all of the laws of what you can and can't do. So that way you don't discriminate against the tenant,
Right.
or reject them for a reason that you couldn't reject them for.
Yep. Because they have children, because whatever, they're disabled or whatever it is. Exactly. Um, all right. So any advice you'd give to a homeowner facing evictions with the tenant or having a difficult, person that's not paying their rent or just giving them aggravation, what would you suggest they do maybe to avoid having to go to evictions?
To avoid it, maybe cash for keys.
Right.
That's always something we didn't talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Um,
That avoids a lot of headaches.
yeah, a lot of people, a lot of landlords will offer cash for keys.
Mm-hmm.
Just try to make an agreement with the occupant to leave to avoid court altogether.
Right.
If that can be done, if the tenant won't agree to that, um, cash for keys is something that you could do during the court proceeding. Um,
So basically, it's just an agreement, like a surrender agreement. They're surrendering the property and the keys back on such and such date. And if they're not out by that date, then evictions will proceed. And if they are out by that date, they'll get whatever the amount of money is that you agreed to pay them to leave.
right.
Hmm. That's what I had to do with my Brooklyn people. So I ended up having to lay out quite a bit of money to get them all out to avoid it being tied up in eviction court for another 3 years. So not only did they live there for 3 years for free, they also walked away with a large lump sum of money to just have me avoid the headache. So, but it was like I would have probably still been stuck with them, all this time later. So it was, risk versus reward, I guess. All right. And then how can people reach out to you if they need eviction, landlord tenant advice, or anything else?
My cell phone number would probably be best. Text or call 917-783-0632.
Okay. Eric, it was very nice having you on. You did a great job.
Thank you.
And we'll do plenty more deals together.
Okay.
Thank you.